and welcome to today's presentations of making the most of your 3D data using 3D via Composer. My name is Alex Arvell, and I'll be walking through some of the examples that 3D via supports in order to help you communicate your data much easier. I'm going to show you the different ways that companies are using this 3D data to help with their technical documentation, assembly instructions, sales and marketing, and even getting into post-sales and training. Many of the deliverables that come from 3D via Composer are in the form of what you're seeing on the screen right now. So anywhere from testing procedures to marketing collateral, product manuals, or assembly instructions, 3D via Composer can feed the imagery into the end documentation in order to create this. We even have some very neat push button web content creation, which I'll touch on a little bit later. So what does 3D via Composer create? 3D via Composer can create vector line art and raster images. On the left hand side, the vector line art is what you'll typically see in printed manuals or online content. The advantage of using vector line art is that you get a very high quality image. So regardless of the print size or the printer quality, you're always assured to have very crisp lines, and if somebody zooms in or blows the image up to get a closer look at it, you'll get that highly refined detailed view for all of your annotations as well as everything that's gone in the assembly. Raster images, on the other hand, are what you'll typically use or see on cover pages for catalogs, inside of brochures, or rendered onto websites for web imagery. And using 3D via Composer, you'll see how nice these renderings can actually come out of. Essentially, what you see is what you get when we're working with the 3D via Composer model. Very great way of reusing your 3D CAD data without necessarily tying up a 3D CAD station to create these types of rendering. Now, although we've been talking a lot about imagery, we can also talk a lot about how we can go beyond the common printout. So you can see in this case, I've actually got this scan code, and if you scan that, it can take you to our website that is actually showing this live from our server, live 3D or live interactive documentation. So you can see here, as I hover over a component, it cross highlights into the bill of material, and vice versa. If I go and highlight in a bill of material item, right on the website, it's going to cross highlight into the graphic imagery and show me where that part is. And as well as if I hover just over the balloon item, it'll find the part for me as well as show me the appropriate line item in the bill of material. Now, this document is also interactive, so 3D via Composer gives you the ability to link one document into another. So now you're seeing that we're working all in HTML. Now, in this HTML document, I've got this vector line art image embedded straight onto the website, and this is all created push button straight out of 3D via Composer. And again, you'll see that same functionality of being able to hover either over the bill of material line item or use the graphic image to highlight the bill of material or the part out of the parts list for you. And just as you've seen before, we can drill into further into the sub-assemblies and get a really good understanding of how this assembly breaks down from its top level assembly. Another big use for 3D via Composer is the ability to take a lot of the verbiage and words out of your manuals. This becomes very important when you're dealing with international translations. The less words you have on there to translate and the more graphical image that you have to show the exact same thing makes it a lot clearer for everybody to understand, and will also reduce your translation costs and errors that might come up because of that. We can do this all by leveraging our existing 3D CAD data. There's also tools that can help detect collisions. So if somebody on the assembly side is also responsible for proving out some of this assembly, a lot of this can be done virtually right inside of 3D via Composer. But really our main benefits are the ability to replace as much of the text that you have in your assembly manuals with more graphics, use more videos, which will then further reduce the amount of words that you need to do or reduce the amount of imagery that you use, and you'll be able to produce these videos at a very low training cost. In fact, John Deere was able to eliminate 4,600 words from their average service manuals. This really helped them when translating the cost or translating these documents for international usage. You saw a little bit more complicated version, but even on a very simple version of communicating how to assemble something, we could create the step-by-step, three-step images that you see on the right-hand side. But imagine how much easier it is to understand what's actually going on with the 3D video that you're seeing on the left-hand side. Now, this is just a very standard Windows Media format video playing, but we can also work with 3D instructions, which I'll look at in just a few minutes. Companies are also using their 3D data to create marketing marketing materials. So in a case like this, you see in the upper right-hand side, we're taking a very complex piece of equipment that we had the CAD data for and able to create a video that makes it easy for the average person to understand what exactly the typical technical benefits of this motor is, and be able to do that again at a very low cost, being able to do that in-house. It can also be used for creating technical brochures, and I'll show you some examples of online part catalogs that we can do. And with all of this, really what you're looking at is a much more engaging method of communicating your technical information to your customers. So I'm sure at some point everybody in the crowd has put together a flat pack furniture, do-it-yourself assembly instructions, or put together a barbecue following some step-by-step instruction. 3D Via Composer can create these types of images and these types of documents. We have Pushbutton PDF generation, which can create the static and animated instructions. And this can make it a lot easier for your customers to understand exactly what it is that you're trying to communicate. Now let's just have a quick look at an example of a 3D model that's embedded on the Javelin Technologies website. So you can see here I'm just browsing through the internet and hitting the play button. Internet Explorer is actually playing through an animation that can show me exactly how this cupboard, this 3-drawer set is put together. Now this is done very simply right over the internet, but imagine this, we're looking at more than just a video. This is actually a 3D model that I can interact with. So I can spin it around, look at it from different areas. If I wanted to, I could show and hide parts, cross-section into it. But again, just simply hitting the play button will take it through this predefined script. In fact, as it's playing, I can rotate it and look at it in different directions. And as soon as I let it go, 3D Via Composer takes it back to the original script. So this is a great way of leveraging your 3D CAD data and being able to generate content that's a lot more engaging, easier to understand, and much more interactive for the end user. Another example of this is actually I've got a 3D model embedded right inside of PowerPoint. So what I'm showing here is not just that we've got this embedded inside PowerPoint, but the 3D Via Composer 3D outputs can be embedded essentially into any document. So that means whether you're distributing stuff through Word, over the web as we saw before, or just through the 3D Via Composer player, you can distribute this content free of charge to anybody with a computer. Now you can see in this case, I'm not hitting play through an animation. What I'm actually doing is clicking on the part and it's taking me to the next assembly step. So this is great because what I can do during the assembly process as an assembler, I can rotate it, look at it from a different direction, and then when I'm ready to go to the next step, I click on the part and it actually takes the animation over to the next appropriate step. So you can see myself walking through this and walking through the entire assembly instructions. And you can see here how I'm using detail bubbles, but again, everything that you're seeing here is a 3D model that we're viewing with the 3D Composer player. And the next example we're going to look at is a very simple animation that I'm just going to play through, and what it's actually going to do is play through a pre-described set of instructions. So in this case, I'm not clicking to advance myself to the next step, but as this is playing, I can rotate the model and see exactly what it is that they're trying to communicate all very quickly by just hitting play on the animation. So again, this becomes a very easy way to communicate. So you can see here, I'm actually going to work with this live document. So you can see I've got a couple views here. And I mentioned earlier that we can update live documents as we make changes to the CAD files and the designs change. Those CAD changes can be pushed into the final documentation. So that makes it very easy for anybody with a computer to always have the latest and greatest data. So let's see it all in action. So again, like I mentioned, we're going to work with this RC car designed by HPI Racing, and HPI Racing does currently design all their products in 3D Via Composer. Now personally myself, I used to race these cars when I was younger, and I actually dug up some documents here. You can see it's circa 1985 of some assembly instructions that they had created for a very similar RC car. Now you see a lot of words typed in there, actually on a manual typewriter it looks like, with some imageries of photograph. Now the funny thing is that I used to personally just use everything on the right hand side to put the whole car together. I didn't like reading the instructions. I wanted to be able to put that together as easily as I could using just the imagery. Now one of the things that I also notice is that a lot of companies are doing a very similar thing today, using digital photographs. Maybe they're using Word to type up a bunch of assembly instructions, but there's a lot of time and overhead put into creating something like this. And what happens when the design changes? We need to wait until manufacturing creates the new part and then go and take all the appropriate images again and replace them in our end documentation. It's often a very slow and tedious process. So this is where we see a lot of companies who already have 3D digital assets being able to leverage that in order to create their final assembly instructions. And we'll go through some of those, an example of those instructions in the next few minutes. Now you already saw how we can embed 3D content into a website. So what I've got here is this RC car that's been added to an HTML, and we'll see how we can use HTML as an effective way of communicating 3D content. Now you'll also see that as I'm working with this file, I'm going to be actually working with the live composer data, and we're going to make some design changes to the back area of the RC car, and we'll see how this also updates all of our end documentation automatically. So I'll just keep this minimized and we'll come back to it later on. Now a couple other examples I wanted to walk through before we get started inside of 3D Via Composer is an example of an instruction manual that was put together using the tools in 3D Via Composer. Images such as this, rendered images, including the decals, all the texturing that you're seeing on the ground, can all be produced straight out of 3D Via Composer. So this is where I was saying that Composer can create the very good looking rendered images, but it can also create a lot of the line art images like you're looking at on this image on the left. And again, you can see as I zoom into that document, we're not getting all pixelated because we are dealing with the vector image. Now one thing that you're going to be able to do with 3D Via Composer is create these types of exploded views showing a lot of what you want to describe in your documentation. Now one thing that we're not going to do inside of Composer is deal with all the text. That type of stuff you are going to put together in your end container, which could be Microsoft Publisher or Word or Adobe InDesign, maybe one of those tools that you're using to put those together. So whatever you're using today, you can continue to use. Now where we will deal with part numbers or with text is going to be in particular to part numbers, descriptions, metadata, part quantity counts, all that kind of stuff that can come from the CAD model can all be included or extracted to reuse in your end documentation. So you don't need to worry about spelling mistakes or consistency or actually knowing the actual part number. All that will be carried from your CAD system directly into 3D Via Composer. So let's just jump into 3D Via Composer and have a look at some of these tools. So first thing that you're going to notice is that we are working in a 3D environment, so you can take your assembly, spin it around, look at it in any direction that you want. You can also go through hiding components if you want to drill down into your assembly and see a little bit more about what's going on in there. you have full access to all the parts. There's also a really nice tool called the digger. Now this is patented technology to 3D Via Composer. You can see what the digger does. As I hover over the assembly, it starts to peel away some of the parts in the center of focus. So you can see here I can create some very easily create some very nice unique parts. This can also be used as a basic zoom tool. So we can use that same tool just to kind of get a close-up view or create some really nice detailed views of what we'd like to do. There's the onion skin mode, which I just finished showing you, as well as something called the X-ray mode, which is similar to the onion skin, but rather than peeling the parts back, we're ghosting them as we go. So running the same type of functionality there over the center of focus. We can also use this tool to create some very unique detail views. So we can easily just go and say, okay, let's just grab this and I want to point to this area, and then let's just say we kind of peel away some parts until I get appropriately what I need, just what I want to focus on. And once I have that image, we can easily just resize it, make it the appropriate size, and position it where we want. And at this point, you'll notice that I'm ready to capture my image. So I'm just going to grab that image and we'll place that. So that allows us to create a detail view. We can put that wherever it is that we want. In this case, if I want to just kind of bring it up to this area here. And what we're doing in 3D Via Composer is creating digital assets. So I'm just going to create a new image there to show how we can bring that together. I mentioned earlier that we're going to make some changes to this back area and the design. You'll notice that I'm using a nice arrow or annotation. Everything in 3D Via Composer is 3D. So in this case, if I want to tuck the arrow behind the geometry, you see we can easily do that, and 3D Via Composer automatically tucks it behind when I tell it to. Now what I'd like to do is start off by showing you some of the tools that we can use that allows us to leverage the 3D CAD data. So not only are we graphically seeing it, but you can see I can actually crawl up the assembly tree. And this is because we have got the full assembly structure straight from our CAD model into 3D Via Composer. So this means I can work with the sub-assemblies as they were set up in the CAD system, but I can also create my own sub-assemblies and part kits if I'd like to as well. So this becomes important when we're shipping different things than what was actually assembled in the 3D model. 3D Via Composer also allows us to interact with the parts. As I mentioned before, it's very easy to create some exploded views in this case. So if I just want to grab the nut on there and pull that off, and then maybe we'll pull off the wheel and the tire together. We'll pull those off right there and show how those come apart. We can easily, again, save that. And you'll see as I'm working with this, I'm going to create a series of views that we can use to later on create animations. I showed you the 3D arrow. Now it's not limited to just straight arrows. You can see here as I hover over the assembly, I can actually snap to the 3D geometry and make this arrow concentric to the actual geometry that we're working with in this case. So if I want to just grab a shaft, I can easily put that on there, drop it on, and then show some direction. Now this arrow also has its own set of characteristics. So again, everything inside of 3D Via Composer can be controlled. So in this case, I just want to make the arrow kind of more of a ribbon style arrow. I can change what that looks like, even change its opacity, how prominent it is in the image if I really want it to stand out. And if I want to make some quick adjustments to that, I can easily adjust what that ends up looking like. So again, with a few quick adjustments, I've quickly made the image that I want. Again, I'm just going to create a new view to show that. Now, just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to bring in some existing views. The nice thing about what I'm doing here too is the fact that you can collaborate on a project. So what this means is that I can have one person working on certain types of views, another person working on a different set of views, and then later on consolidate them into one single project. So just using the same base model of the RC car, you can see I can quickly just bring in all the images that I require. We'll just kind of quickly flip through those. You see that nicely rendered image. More use of arrows there, and again you can see those arrows being 3D as I rotate them. Actually, a quick little note on this view here. You notice that I brought in a panel with one of those digger views, but that means you can also bring in JPEG images and screenshots or photographs or anything else that you want and combine it all into this project. You can see what limited use of text I am using in this case, just to show some simple translations of off in different languages. That is a nice use of using the text box. So you do have a text capability inside of 3D via Composer, but not something that you'd want to replace a full publishing software with. Now, where I want to get to in this case is actually creating some imagery. So you can see here in this case, I've got a gearbox. Again, I can use the tools inside of 3D via Composer just to hide some components that I'm not interested in working with. 3D via Composer, you can see, has different methods of showing your images. So whether you want them, more of a rendered, realistic looking view, or even if you wanted to do a combination of. So in this case, I'm just going to grab certain components here. And what I'm doing is using something called selection sets. And this is a way of setting up predefined selection so that I always grab the same things over and over, so I don't have to go and control select everything. In this case, I'm just going to grab all those inside components, and if I wanted them to stand out a little bit, I can combine a rendered image with line art image. So again, there's no real rules as to how you can show it. It's really up to you as you're going through your setup for your imagery. Now, what I'd like to do, you saw earlier how I took some components and moved them around. I'm going to show you some of the different explode methods that we can do. So in a case like this, I can take all the gears in there and we'll just pull them apart in 3D. Kind of position this in a way that I can see everything that I need. And once I have these pulled apart, what I'd like to do is go and make all of the technical illustrations and parts list for this. So we have a bill of material workshop, and inside of this bill of material workshop, this is where I can go and say, let's generate the BOM ID, and I only want to do it on the parts that I've selected, and create all the callouts. And then once I have the callouts, I can go ahead and show that BOM table and pull that BOM table into view. So in this case, I'm just going to bring it up and show how that looks. So again, with the simple push of a button, I've created my first technical image there with complete part list and everything. And now using the technical illustration workshop, this is where we can go and create the vector line art, which I was showing you earlier, to leverage into additional into your final end documentation. Now, what I'm actually doing in a push button method here is not only creating the vector image, but I'm also creating a hyperlinked interactive website. So in this case, you can see it's HTML, and I can use this later on to embed into any website, or if I want to embed it into PowerPoint or Word or any other type of document. It's easy to grab this information and put it straight in. But automatically push button interactive documents, so taking the part numbers and quantity counts from your CAD model and bringing it into this document, again, with very little or no effort required on your part. Now we can show you a couple of other examples of how we can generate some really nice exploded views and leverage this type of functionality for different purposes. So you saw in the beginning I was working with the full car. So imagine creating an image very easily where I can just grab in this case I'll just grab the body and all the parts. We'll move this out of the way, kind of pull this apart and pull it out. And my end result of what I want is to create a vector line art image of this RC car. And in fact, what we can also do is maybe just grab the whole bottom of it, and we'll use the spherical explode. So what spherical explode does is allows me to pull components apart in a spherical method. So you can see I can just blow apart every single component in the entire assembly. In fact, what I'll do is I'm just gonna do the first step of just leaving it intact, and we'll save that as a view. And I'll just drag and drop this view up to the top, just so that when we play our animation, again, what I'm using is these views as a method of a storyboard. And then my next step will be to grab the entire chassis and all the components there, and we'll pull these apart. So you can see how easy it is to just essentially just drag and drop where you want these. And I'm just going to reposition the view just a little bit, just to give it a bit more appeal so it looks a little bit better. And once I have the view that I want, it's very easy just to create that new view. Now very easily what I've done, again just reordering this, you'll see that when I hit the play button, 3D Via Composer is just going to go through this as a step-by-step animation. So we'll just go back to the beginning and hit the play button, and essentially push of a button, I get a very nice, easily created animation that shows step-by-step exactly what I'm trying to communicate to my customer. So it's very easy to do, and essentially allows you to take all of your 3D CAD data and leverage it for communication purposes without any knowledge of how a CAD system works. I really like some of the other tools that 3D Via Composer has. In a case like this, we can control everything about the environment. So in this case, I can go ahead and turn the ground on and give it a bit more emphasis as I'm, if I want to add in a mirror there or shadow the part. 3D Via Composer can add all these realistic elements straight to my environment. And you can see how easy it is to basically take that environment, if I want to change it from a black background to maybe a blue background, and give it a little bit of nice appeal to the image. So it's very easy to work with all these tools. The next thing I'm going to focus on is not just creating imagery, but also being able to create animations. So you'll notice what we're going to do next is basically turn on the animation toolbar, and let's just update that view so we get that nice image updated there. And then all we need to do is take the views that I've created ahead of time. So we'll take that home view and we'll drop it in about 2 seconds apart. I'm going to bring in the animation of the part coming, or the body coming off, and we'll pull that apart, and then maybe I'll bring the body back down and we'll go back to neutral. So again, just kind of taking the storyboard of what I've created earlier, and then we'll focus on the back area there, and then maybe we want to get rid of the body and focus on the front axle, so we'll just kind of drag that into view. And you see here as I'm going, I'm just going to drag the keys around just so that we can easily create the animation that we need. Now with that simple push of a few drag and drops in there, we'll see what we get here. Now 3D Via Composer uses a keyframed animation, so that means any animation that you create can easily be edited. You can also edit the camera positions, focus points, hide and show and hide transitions, and very easily put together a very nice set of animations that can either be played in 3D, or you can also export them as an AVI, and again that's just going to be a matter of a single right click button. Now what I'm going to do there is just bring in the finished animation I worked on earlier, and you can see that we've added some flashing colors there, used the rendered image of the body with the decals. I also used some of those arrows I created earlier to show how where something might plug in. So it becomes a very nice and easy to do animation, easy to create animations. So because we're working with the live document in this case, all I need to do is hit save, and 3D Via Composer is going to update this document to everywhere where it's being used. Now another really nice thing that we can do is, using the high resolution image workshop, I can go and export all of these images in a single shot. So I can go and say, let's save all of my images that I've created, and we'll go put this into we'll just go and put this into a folder where all of the images are going to live. So the really nice thing about this is that wherever these images reside, if they are being used in any end documentation, they're all going to be updated automatically. So it's a simple selection there. You can see it progressing through all the images. Again, we'll just go into that folder that we created, and you can see all of the images that I've been working on all published out and ready to use in JPEG format. So this makes it very easy and quick to update all of your end documentation. Another thing that got updated while I was doing that is because I'm running this website linked directly to the live 3D Via Composer project that I'm working on, a simple refresh, so I just hit F5 on my keyboard, will then refresh the website with all the new features that I added in there, all the views, as well as that animation that I created and put into the file. So now when we hit the play button, it's actually going to animate through that series of steps. Again, we are dealing with a 3D model, so we can rotate it, view it in different directions, and 3D Via Composer will show that animation. Now, the nice thing about this is all we have here is a combination of HTML along with some 3D Via Composer content. Some other things that we've created while we're here is some interactive parts list. So you can see here as I hover over the parts on the left-hand side, we're also highlighting the components in the graphics area, and vice versa. If I select a component, it can also show us a nice preview of it in the bottom left-hand side. So there is some very nice interactivity that we've done. Set up some markers here just for some placeholders on the assembly steps. So if somebody wanted to walk themselves through the how to install the battery, they can jump straight to that location. We also have that 3D technical illustration that I've created, all interactive. So as I select on the component, it's going to bring up the parts list item and highlight that and cross-highlight each other. So it becomes a very nice way of giving your customers or whoever might be on the assembly floor a nice way of communicating. Now, what happens when design engineering decides to make changes to the design? So what we're going to do is actually simulate that. I'm just going to select on the body, and we're going to use the geometry update. So there's a lot of different ways of updating the CAD geometry. You can go all the way from the original CAD files and update every single part in an assembly from top down, or you can go part by part or sub-assembly by sub-assembly, and 3D Via Composer will update everything as required. So you can see here in this case, let's just jump to a couple different views where this shows up, and in particular the one that I had with the arrow. So as we Now, what happens when design engineering decides to make changes to the actual geometry or the metadata, the part numbers? So in this case, I showed you earlier how we had a possible design change coming to the body. So all I'm going to do is bring in those changes directly into 3D Via Composer. So simply using an update functionality here, we're just going to bring in the file that represents this new geometry. 3D Via Composer will let us know that there were some changes being made, and you can see here how 3D Via Composer absorbed those changes. So we now have a bit of a slanted back on the design here. But what it actually did is not only update a single location, but this is going to update every single place where this image is being used. So earlier you saw how I used the high resolution image workshop to bring those, to export all those images out to our final imagery. So now we can see that 3D Via Composer is going to update all those images out to our final documentation. In a couple different places where this image where these images exist, we're just going to update the imagery, and we'll just go back to the high resolution image workshop, and we'll export all those images back to that same location. So very simple single step selection here. We'll just choose to bring out all the views, and I'm just going to bring it back into that same folder. And what we're going to do is do just a single save, and 3D Via Composer is just going to overwrite all of the existing images that we initially created. So now wherever the documentation is using that, 3D Via Composer is just fed all new images to that. So the next time you open up your document, so we can see here, once we jump to one of the images, there we go, one of the images that shows this change, wherever that image shows up inside of our final publication, will then have an updated image, the latest and greatest geometry included. Now this also includes our animation. So we spent quite a bit of time creating an animation, and we have that animation loaded, but without any extra work at all. 3D Via Composer, because it's replaced the geometry directly from the CAD file, it's now able to maintain that all the animation intact. So all we need to do is save the file. So we're going to save the Composer project that we're working on. And doing this is simply going to update wherever this Composer project is being updated or being housed. So a couple places where this is happening is in the website that we initially started off with. So again, I'm just going to hit F5 on my keyboard, do a very quick update. So 3D Via Composer is going to update the geometry in the model, and then within a few seconds, the next time somebody loads up this website, because we were taking the 3D geometry directly from the CAD model into 3D Via Composer, 3D Via Composer now has updated that geometry wherever it exists. So in this case, on our imagery, as well as the animation that we created, and any other screenshot that we might have associated to this 3D model. Now another really obvious place where that change has happened, because my PowerPoint has the 3D model embedded inside of the PowerPoint. Now when I load up that same 3D model that we were looking at directly inside of PowerPoint, you're going to see that everything that I created now becomes up to date. We'll just so how do we do this? So basically, we're using a tool like SolidWorks or other 3D CAD data to author or create the initial CAD geometry. So you're still going to continue to design in a CAD package. All you're going to do is bring that into 3D Via Composer to author the final images, AVIs, HTMLs, whether it's a website or a 3D PDF, or embed any of those objects into another piece of software so that you can distribute this. When design changes come along, you saw there how I updated the geometry directly from the CAD file. We can take those changes and push them into 3D Via Composer. So an important part of that means that in 3D Via Composer, you have full control as to what and when you update. So that means you don't need to have changes automatically forced from the 3D CAD model into your project. You'll choose when you do that. And then once you've updated geometry inside of 3D Via Composer with a few simple save as replacements of files, and republishing out the images out of the high resolution image workshop, we can then distribute all these distribute the imagery out to all the documents to ensure that they're up to date. So again, flipping back to the PowerPoint that we were working with earlier, you saw earlier how I had simple 2 images or 2 views loaded into the PowerPoint with no real animation going on. It was just a 3D model that I can spin around. But you can see now, because the 3D Via Composer player, which is free, is playing right inside of PowerPoint, everything is up to date. So whatever I was seeing inside of the PowerPoint or inside of 3D Via Composer in the full version is now playing essentially inside of this PowerPoint. Now this could be inside of a PDF or inside of a Word file or embedded into a website. I'm just using this as a single example as to how we can do that. But the very important part of this entire thing is really that as we are working with our 3D CAD data and publications have been made, once publication has authored that to the final documents, whether it's in PowerPoint, Word, or inside of an Adobe product, at any time you can then take this information and update it with the latest and greatest design engineering data that comes straight from the CAD model. And this really helps organizations. So at the beginning, we were talking about time to market delays that management's concerned with. We also were talking about how engineering may spend a lot of time doing repetitive tasks. But as you can see in the images here, a lot of companies are using photographs along with Illustrator or Photoshop to annotate some of the images. And you could see how easily I did that inside of 3D via Composer. So that's one big payback that you're going to get from 3D via Composer, is being able to work directly with the images or the CAD data. But because you're doing this, this is also going to reduce a lot of the redo time. So when CAD engineering changes come, you're not going to have to go and take screenshots all over again or wait till it's manufactured and take photographs. So this is really going to save on a lot of that redo time, and it can actually eliminate it and just making it, a few clicks of a button to update things. And really what this allows you to do is to take that documentation process and move it much further ahead into the design and manufacturing process. So where in the past you may have waited for the product documentation to happen after all the design was complete, Rev A or Rev B, and then you would start your documentation. Now you can go with the confidence that knowing that the 3D via Composer is going to update your end documentation, you can actually start it when engineering is in its conceptual stage and you have some of the initial ideas put down on paper. You can start laying out your 3D via Composer project. And also included in that is all the interactive 3D animations and HTML documents and 3D PDFs that we saw over the last little while. This really is what becomes our savings or our return on our investment. We're able to get your product to market quicker. We're improving the operational efficiency by allowing engineering to communicate directly with people who are communicating with, whether it's your assembly department or directly to the end consumer. And we're using a very good tool like 3D via Composer that gives you that really nice quality rendering or high quality image or very descriptive videos, as you saw in the last little while. So this is how 3D via Composer allows you to leverage all of your 3D data and repurpose it for lots of different reasons. So I think today I focused a lot on the technical documentation and possibly some of the sales and marketing end of it too, with some of those renderings that we created or the videos that we created. But really a lot of the tools that we saw today could be used for manufacturing or assembly instructions with internal communications, or you could be using this for more of a marketing or after sales training type of thing for either service technicians or out to actually right to the end consumer. So thank you for joining me. I think today was an introduction to what 3D via Composer can do. Along with the help of Javelin, we can help you implement this and make it a very successful product. So we'd love to talk to you and get an understanding of what your visions or goals are and get a very good understanding of how you would like to leverage the 3D CAD assets that you already own to leverage that into the future to use it for product communication. Thanks. This was Alex Arvallo, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day.